Hey guys, it's Pablo, the host of The Wine Maverick, and today's episode is brought to you by Identity Wine Company. Identity wines are truly artisan small lot wines sourced from unique vineyards throughout California and handcrafted in Napa Valley by me, Pablo Antonio Suarez. For more info, head over to www.identitywines.com where you can check out my current releases in the online bottle shop. You can check out wine club membership options and learn more about me and my journey in becoming a winemaker in Napa Valley. Identity Wine Company. Every bottle has a story. Now, let's start the show.
Ooh, Identity Wine. Yeah.
The White Maverick is prepared for takeoff. Clear the runway. In 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to The Wine Maverick. I'm your host, Pablo Antonio Suarez, and with me in studio today I have RJ Harlow. What's up, buddy?
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for finally making this happen.
Yeah, I know it's been a long trip trying to make this happen, but here we are. It's
Here
about
we are.
time.
Absolutely. All right, so you might not know the drill, but the guest gets to pick the wine. So you brought a bottle of wine, and then you did not tell me what it was until now. So let's go ahead and see, what did you bring? What you got?
Beautiful. So what I brought was this beautiful 2021 Pastor's Pride Bordeaux that I made.
Ah,
And so it's a fun little wine. It's a California blend, but it comes from 3 great vineyards all over Northern California, one of which I get Cabernet from every year that I've just loved. So let me just open this thing up and we'll dig right into it.
cool. Sounds good. All right, we're going to open this bottle. I was really excited to talk to RJ because, started his life as a home winemaker. You can listen to that cork. Oh, yeah. Ooh,
There we go.
perfect. Nice.
That would get us killed in the tasting room, but hey.
Hey, we don't worry about that here. Hold your glass up to the mic and pour it. Other way, other side. Yeah. There you go. Audio proof that the wine has been opened and has been poured. This,
Boom.
boom. Chin chin. Nice.
Yeah, I picked this one because I haven't opened it up in a while, so I wanted to see how it was doing.
2021 vintage. All right. So before we go into it, I just want to do a little preface because, I said you're RJ Harlow. And it's really cool because you just launched your wine brand officially.
Yes, it's officially 100% ready to go and fully launched. Harlow Wine Company LLC, based out of Sacramento, California.
Nice.
So we're up and running. We're ready to join into this crazy industry.
So you started off like most of us did as a home winemaker, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And when did that journey start for you?
So that started in 2018. I was actually sitting in a room, and I was actually at my parents' house, and I was watching it for them, and I realized, man, we don't really have a whole lot to pass down. Now, at the time, things were different for us, but I just started thinking about it, and I go, what would be something that I could pass down to future Harlows and that I have as children coming down the road? And I thought, I could make wine.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of led me into that world. Is I thought about it and joined a home winemaker club, and next thing you know, I was making my first vintage.
Nice. And so 18 was your first vintage?
2019 ended up being my
2019.
first. I missed the 18 harvest,
Okay,
so I had to
cool.
start in 2019.
Cool. Well, let's jump into your wine. Let's get our nose on it. Let's start tasting it. What are you seeing here so far?
Well, I'm definitely not mad at the color.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Getting a nice little ruby on it. Yes, it's 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Merlot, and 20% Cabernet Franc.
Fun. I love Cabernet Franc, so anytime there's Cab Franc in the blend, I'm in. Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah,
That is great.
that held up really good.
That held up beautifully, man. So a little bit muted on the aromatics. but there is like this dark kind of jammy fruit profile. And then on the palate, dude, I mean, that is just, it's got some pucker power, man. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Good acidity too.
Yeah, good acidity. The aromatics, with a lot of my 2021s, anytime I open them, they don't come alive for a good 45 minutes.
Yeah, nice.
So,
And that wasn't a dig, by the way. Some
No,
wines
no.
take a while. Yeah, I know you know,
Yeah.
but just in case the audience heard that and was like, ouch, no, it's just some wines take a while to kind of come out of their shell. Some wines don't smell like much, but taste amazing. And I think that is, at least right now, just freshly opened, that is rocking and rolling.
Yeah, this was a fun one to make. So the three varietals that I was telling you about that I used for it, I actually had in the year prior made individual samples of each one of them. So I made a Cabernet from a vineyard out in Yellow County. I made a Cabernet Franc from the Sierra foothills, and I made a Merlot from Clarksburg. And so I liked all three of them. So the next year I thought, well, let's make a Bordeaux blend, and played around. And actually the way it came about it is I took one of my favorite Bordeaux's and started putting all my samples next to it, and whatever one came the closest is what I tried to go with, and ended up winning several awards as a home winemaker, and
Nice.
I'm pretty proud of it.
The jump from home winemaking to commercial, how has that process been for you?
Well, the winemaking portion has been just fine. 2021 was actually the first year that I started thinking about really upping the quantities of what I make. The problem hasn't been the winemaking. The problem has been dealing with all the paperwork, the different organizations. You think you're done with one, and that's all you need to do, and then you
Yeah.
find out there's four more that you have to pay fees to, and that was the part that was the most frustrating. But making wine, the challenges seem to be a little bit less and less with what I used to struggle with.
It's interesting because when I started in 2018 as well, and I interned at a small family estate, and my first batch was actually pretty much straight to commercial, just because I had found some people that I can work with and use their kind of bond to slide in on and make wine. And I was hanging out with, I still hang out with a couple of home winemakers that I make some wines with. And I really much, I understand what you're saying, because I treated commercial wine just like a home wine, like a home winery. Especially how we both make wines in very small lots. That is kind of like the idea, right? To be that garagiste kind of style.
Exactly.
And doing small lot wine like that really forces you to be artistic, crafty, budget minded, and kind of more creative, as opposed to like being big commercial. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I should point out, because those listening won't know some of the undertones here, but part of the reason when I said it's become a lot easier, some of the stuff that I had to go through with that created issues, it's easier now because I'm running my operation through someone else's operation, so I get to use their equipment. That's what makes it easier.
Yes, and that same thing here. That I make wine with a couple of other winemakers. We share a facility, and that really is the way we can do it as small operators. Because I mean, to go out on your own, buy the tanks, buy all the equipment. Wine is not a cheap undertaking. It could be backbreaking for small producers. So yeah, for sure, we all kind of make wines with other people to kind of ease that burden.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't take into mind. I mean, how often do you have somebody come in and you talk to them and they're like, we love wine, tell us about the process, and then you get about 30 seconds in, their eyes are glazed over.
Yeah, for sure.
And when it comes to most commercial wineries, they can show you things. When you're a small guy, it's very hard to get access to materials that will make your life easier.
Yes, very hard.
And even if you can, you're not getting it at the best price. Nobody's giving you the premium rate. They're giving you their most expensive rate. And so those are the challenges that are fun in one way to overcome and frustrating in another. But it's still a fun project.
What is it about wine and winemaking for you that keeps you coming back?
It's funny. I ask myself that every year mid-harvest.
That's why I ask it.
Wine is such an amazing drink when you start to sit there and think about it. I mean, I enjoy other drinks too. I enjoy beer. I enjoy spirits as well. But wine, for whatever reason, has this mystique about it that just roots itself in conversations like this one and seems to be very positive for family gatherings.
Yeah.
And so that has a part to do with it. But what really keeps me going back is the essence of feeling like I get to play a part in nature's role and then make something that people can enjoy on their table.
I freaking love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
As we've been talking, I'm tasting through this wine, and it's really bright fruit here. I love how, again, we're talking about the acid, but you get like this bright cherry cola thing, and then good tannin. It's got some drying effect, but it's not like smacking me in the face. This is a beautifully made, very balanced wine. Good job.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah. So this is, I'm looking at the label right now. It's a beautiful label, very traditional black, with Harlow in white and a little bit of like gold with your kind of insignia on the top there. And then it says Pastor's Pride. So let's talk about what's the reasoning behind that?
All right, Pastor's Pride. I get a lot of grief for this one. I also get a lot of people that say, I love that label. But it's kind of twofold. When I had made a few vintages and was starting to think about playing around with blends, I started thinking about my winemaking in relation to my family. So first and foremost, I grew up as a pastor's kid. My dad was a pastor in a Free Methodist church. First church that he planted was in Dallas, Texas, which is where I was born. And then we bounced around from city to city, coast to coast. Basically, he was planting churches, and we were following with him. So when I was sitting with my best friend one day, he was helping me bottle one of my first vintages, who, by the way, this friend also happens to be a pastor. We were kind of joking. We thought, let's make a wine called Pastor's Pride. And I thought, that's actually a good idea. It represents, of course, the person who's helping me, but it represents my father more than anything, because I started thinking about, all right, pastor obviously represents him. The word pride, some people in church can get a little worked up about that.
Sure.
But I thought, what would a pastor be prideful in? He'd be prideful in something he created. My dad told me all the time how proud he was of myself and my siblings. And so when I went out to set this blend and make this blend for the first time, it was with the idea of just making a blend. Pastor's Pride was actually in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But when I put a sample bottle out, basically a 750 milliliter, that I wanted to wait and come back 2 months afterwards to see how it was. When I tasted it, I thought, no, this is a great representation of what that name means to me and my family. So
Nice.
That's how I came up with it.
I love that. I always love the stories behind, the bottle. And I think that is actually a really good one. When did you come to California?
So we moved to Fresno, California when I was 3. So that would have been around 1988.
Okay.
And we lived there for a couple years, but we didn't permanently move to California until I was in 2nd grade. And I don't remember what that year is. I don't feel like doing the math right now.
Fair enough. We don't have needle too hard on that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And where would you say that you really like to source from? What's like your honey hole as far as like getting grapes?
2 of my favorite places to get grapes from are the Sierra Foothills and Clarksburg. I feel like they're heavily underrated. The Sierra Foothills has such a vast growing region for different varietals that may not be as popular, but they can also produce some varietals that are more household names to Bordeaux fans. So Cabernet Franc, which is where I get the Cabernet Franc for this wine, and another one, does really well in certain parts of the Sierra Foothills. And then Clarksburg makes some amazing fruit, Chenin Blanc.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I feel it's funny because I know you. We're friends and colleagues, and we've known each other for a while. And I feel like I'm leading the witness because I asked that question on purpose because we do share some sourcing sites. And, when people think about wine, specifically like, wine country, they think Napa, especially like, most of the wines, there are people that literally just think of Napa being like where wine comes from. And there is so much more to wine, especially up here in California, Northern California, than just Napa. There's Sonoma. There's what you just mentioned, the foothills, which is like a freaking, just amazing place for
Exactly.
Grapes. And then Clarksburg, which is like the unsung hero, the workhorse region, right? So I'm glad that you said that because it's just kind of the whole point of this podcast is to shine a light on other parts of the industry. We are recording in Napa, right? But most of the grapes that we source are actually coming from other places, and they need recognition and shine as well. So, yeah.
They do. And when it comes to Napa, Napa has the name for a reason. Napa has made some history. It's made a splash in the wine world, and it's got some great fruit coming out of here. But the reality is it's not cheap, and their fruit is not cheap. And I'd love to play with some Napa fruit, but at the end of the day, if I can find great fruit for a fourth of the price,
why not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I found. And so part of the whole Harlow brand, going back to it, it's representing my family, a hard working class family. Yeah, my dad was a pastor, but my grandfather was a contractor. And when I view hard working regions, I think of places not named Napa and Sonoma. It's not that they don't work hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's kind of, and I think you're kind of getting to the point of like, there is this like acclaim and this kind of like air to Napa and Sonoma because they're like the rock stars, right? But like you're saying, the more working class, the more like gritty regions that need a little bit more help are the other regions, and where we can also get grapes at a bargain price. So for cash-strapped, up-and-coming winemakers, you see a lot of them out in those regions because there's so much bargain out there. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And two, coming with it, a lot of people think that because it's Napa, everything grows great here.
Right.
And that's not the case. Cabernet is excellent, and Merlot does amazing, and other varietals do really, really well.
Yeah, rule of thumb, Bordeaux varietals, some Chardonnay in certain places, Sauvignon Blanc.
Exactly.
But everything else is, it's there are varietals that are more conducive and better in other regions, like the Rhone varietals, for example.
Yeah, Rhone varietals are fun to play with.
Right.
And they're really fun to play with out of Sierra Foothills and Clarksburg, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say Contra Costa too. There's some really cool stuff out there. And I know it's really hard for like a listener if you've never been out here. It's kind of like we're throwing out all these names, and I don't want to kind of throw too much at you. But basically, within the, what would you say, like 50 to 100 mile radius of Napa, Sonoma, San Francisco Bay Area, there are some other regions that are just so full of potential, right?
Oh, plenty.
Yeah.
I mean, just to name a couple unsung regions, you mentioned Contra Costa. That's one. Livermore Valley.
Livermore, yeah.
Livermore, they have some great Cab Franc coming out of Livermore.
The redheaded stepchild of the Bay Area. They get no love.
Yeah. So you have them, and of course there's a lot of noise coming out of Sassoon for Petit Syrah Zinfandel. And I'd say that the biggest name that was a shocker to me, might not be a shocker to a lot of winemakers, is Lake County.
Lake County, yep.
I'm seeing a lot of people make some wine out of Lake County, and it's some pretty good stuff. Yeah,
I mean, I this is biased because, I came up through two family-owned wine companies that are actually very big, Gallo and Kendall Jackson. And, to me, when I think of Lake County, I think of Kendall Jackson VR Chardonnay because that, basically put them on the map. Yeah, Vineyards Reserve Chard. Yeah. But there are, like you say, a lot of really good producers, a lot of good winemakers heading out to Lake County and getting some great stuff. There's some Riesling out there, Sauv Blanc. There's some Charbonneau. There's cool varietals out there, man.
Yeah, and part of what made California wine so amazing back in the day was the freedom that California wine had.
Yes,
that
huge.
France and Italy didn't have as much. Well, here we are, fast forward to 2025, and Napa, just because of how much you can charge for Cabernet, is finding itself pinholed with a handful of varietals.
Yes.
So these other regions that we're talking about have not only the freedom to play around with varietals that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't, but we're finding that they create some amazing fruit, and they still do the classic ones as well. Cabernet, I mean, I get some great Cabernet out of Yolo County, of all places. Most people wouldn't even think that it could grow there.
Yolo County, what major cities would fall under that county just for?
Yolo County, Clarksburg is actually in Yolo County for part of it.
Right.
So West Sacramento would be the first main city, and then you have Dixon, Davis, I think Woodland. Yeah, Woodland's part
Woodland is Yolo County, yeah.
Yolo County
Winters.
as well. Winters,
Yep.
That's right, Winters.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your main towns and cities you're going to come across. But obviously there's vast land and there's a lot of vineyards out there too, and some of them are really good, some
Not so much.
not so much.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the fun, for me, the fun kind of scavenger hunt, if you will, like, seeking out these vineyards and kind of places that you would not suspect. That is my favorite part of me personally, of being a winemaker. You find yourself, in my case, in an old 2003 Chevy Silverado in the middle of freaking nowhere, but then you find this amazing little vineyard that seems like nobody else has found yet, and you feel like this conquistador, like finding a new world.
Yeah.
To me, that is like the beauty of it all.
That certainly is the fun part.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I found a vineyard like that. It was actually in Amador County. Some guy had just purchased a new home, and on it came something around 40 acres of vineyard, maybe 50 acres of vineyard. He had Petit Syrah, Zinfandel, and I don't know, one other varietal. And I tried to get Zin, but he was all sold out. But he had plenty of Petit. And so I remember going out there, driving in my little Dodge pickup.
Nice.
And I'm in the middle of this place, and I'm thinking to myself, there's a lot of rattlesnakes out here. If I get bit, I'm screwed. But just being out there, putting my hands on the vine, looking at the clusters, seeing what fruit I was going to get. And that Petit Syrah was dark, it was inky, it was rich, it had good fruit, and it had really good acid. And I remember just thinking, I can't let anyone else know about this
Right?
vineyard.
That's so funny how, like, you become protective of these little things, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, you're literally, like you said before, you're kind of taking your best shot at corralling Mother Nature, right?
Yeah,
And doing something with it. That's like, it's just creation. It's really fun.
exactly. And any winemaker, too, will tell you that's the beauty of the whole thing, is finding these places that are tucked back away from any main road. And when you're just sitting there and you're sweating and you're working, there's always that moment where you stop and you just look around and enjoy the beauty. And that's a big part of it, too.
Yes. What do you prefer, late night harvests or early morning picks?
Unfortunately for me, more often than not, and this goes back to what we talked about early, we mentioned about being a small guy and some issues coming along with it. One of the issues of being a small guy is a lot of the times I don't get to make the choices that I want to make.
You can't call your own pick.
Bingo.
Yeah. So real quick, I know, explain that. Why is that? What do you mean by that?
So a lot of times these vineyards, they're working with these commercial wineries, or that's their goal.
Right.
And so not only do these farmers want to make money, but they have opinions on when the fruit is ripe and when it needs to be picked. And they're not always thinking about your best interest at mind.
You, the winemaker that has an idea of when you want to pick your fruit.
Bingo.
Right.
And so when you come in and you're small, like I am, and you're only wanting maybe a couple tons, a lot of these places put major restrictions. One particular vineyard told me if I'm not getting 13 tons of fruit, then I pick when the big boys pick, meaning that there's a commercial winery that makes about 10,000 cases a year, and that's one of their main clients. And when they want to pick that fruit, that's when I get to come pick that fruit.
Right, and that is a big handcuff because, RJ and I, both winemakers, what he thinks ripe fruit is might not be what I think ripe fruit is. And if I'm bringing in more tonnage, more, grapes than he is, through the hierarchy, I have the right to call that pick, and it kind of screws RJ over. And that is really hard. Being small winemakers, we're always that really low man on that totem pole, and we are at the mercy of other big wineries.
Exactly.
So it's a tough game to play.
And it's a hard game because, if I had my way, I would, with every vineyard before making major choices, I would do multiple harvests.
Right.
And that's because a lot of wineries, they'll tell you that, we need to pick everything at a certain level of ripeness. Maybe it's 23 bricks, maybe it's 25, maybe it's 27. It doesn't really matter what it is. They seem to be stuck in one number.
Sure.
And I don't agree that that's the case for every vineyard. As a matter of fact, I think some vineyards want to be picked at a lower brix while others thrive at a higher brix.
Yeah, bricks meaning sugar level, which is what winemakers really seek out because that will ultimately give them their flavor profile and their alcohol content. So that's the guiding light. Brix, Brix.
And so if I had my way, I would go to certain vineyard blocks and I would do a small harvest at, let's say, 23 bricks, which would probably yield in the 13% ratio.
Right.
And then I would come back again and do it at 24 and a half, which would put me in the 14s, probably the high 14s. And then I would do one more at 26, which would put me at a high alcohol. But it would be great because I want to see what exactly that would taste like and what complications I might have. And through doing that, I would have a better understanding of the vineyard.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world.
Right.
Unfortunately, what happens is, hey, we're picking at this number. Come and get it.
Yeah. And again, being the small guy, you don't really have a choice. There's been times where I'm sure it's happened to you. It's like, hey, they decided they want to pick tomorrow. Oh, you're not ready yet? Well, get your shit ready because we're picking this whether you want it or not. We'll leave it on the side of the road for you. And that is always hard to hear when you have to, borrow equipment, borrow a pickup truck, borrow bins, and then just go do that. It's really, really tough. So when you go to a grocery store or like a small bottle shop and you see that small producer, the amount of stuff that went into making that bottle, give that person a chance, please.
Yeah, definitely give them a shot, especially if they're in a grocery store.
Yeah, totally.
Another thing, too, when it comes to harvesting, because I have found a few vineyards that will let me pick the harvest. But the problem with all the ones I've found is the majority of those guys either, I don't know if they don't know how to take a bricks reading, an accurate one, or if they just don't care, or if they're really just trying to get me out there to harvest early because they don't want to deal with it, which a lot of times it's the latter.
Yes.
But I've had a couple places where the first year that I've got fruit with them, I loved it. And then they call me up the following year and they're like, hey, it's ready to go. Well, for most of my winemaking career, I've had to work a full-time job, not for Harlow Wine Company.
Right.
So I don't have the time to go walk the vineyards. I don't have time to take my own brick readings. I don't have the ability to do what some of these large wineries pay people to do. And I've had several vintages for certain varietals where I've harvested the fruit, told that it would be at a certain level. I rush out there because I'm worried it's going to get too ripe, and it comes in at 21 bricks.
Which is very underripe and kind of hard to work with.
Yeah, and I'm talking about red grape varietals, so that's really not a number you want.
Right.
Luckily, I've been able to make lemonade out of lemons in those circumstances, but I've never been able to make single wines. They always end up being something that if I get an overripe harvest, I just blend it back with that.
And that's the thing, you just brought the Pasture's Pride, the red blend, and that is kind of like a winemaker's trick up their sleeve. Blending different grape varietals together is very much that kind of smoke and mirrors where we can kind of make the wine taste like something and basically use that to our advantage.
Exactly. And that's exactly what some of these blends are. As I
Right.
was able to take a couple different varietals, put them together, and make something beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, it's literally, instead of painting with black and white, you're using all the colors you have at your disposal.
Bingo.
You're based out of Sacramento?
I am based out of Sacramento. Basically, same as you, I'm working in another facility that allows small winemakers to come in. The place where that worked and made the most sense for me was in Sacramento. Now, I do live in Sacramento, so it makes sense on that level. But yeah, we're right out of Sacramento doing our production.
Very nice. So we actually ordered some pizza. We're having a pizza party podcast, and I think that is showing up right now. So we are going to take a break. We're going to scarf down some pizza, and then we'll be right back after this.
Perfect.
Pizza time. All right, and we're back. Once again, I'm your host, Pablo Antonio Suarez, and I'm with my guest, Mr. RJ Harlow. Welcome back, dude.
Thank you.
How was that pizza?
It was pretty good. I've actually never had that place before. It was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, they're a local outfit. You know what the hell? We'll give them a free plug. It's Papa Joe's in downtown Napa. Pretty damn good.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we covered a lot about our winemaking and your kind of, your start in the industry, but I wanted to segue to just that, the state of the industry as we know it. And I know right now wine is kind of being dogged a little bit. We're in a major downturn. You and I both work in tasting rooms, and we've kind of seen a difference in clientele and a difference in just kind of from tipping culture to a more novice kind of palate. And I just want to kind of ask you, what do you feel about the current state of the industry?
Man, talk about a loaded question.
Right?
Well, oh man, so many ways to unpack it. I think first is starting out with just admitting that the industry has some bumpy roads ahead of them. A good sign of that, of course, you and I both know, but everyone else doesn't know. Last year, there were multiple places, multiple vineyards that they went from charging a premium to giving a discount.
Right.
And then next thing you know, 2 weeks later, you see them begging for you to come harvest their fruit. And that's never a good sign. And so you can't deny that the industry is getting ready to potentially go through some really tough times. That being said, I like to look at things at the potential bright side. And while the clientele has been different, it's been younger, I think that part is at least a good thing.
Interesting. Yes, there is a little bit of a shining light there, right? Wine has always kind of relied on the boomers, if you will, the older generation, maybe a more mature palate, but they've kind of fallen away. And we are now, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X are getting into it. They're getting a taste for it. But my girlfriend and I, in our pilot episode, covered this. They're still not kind of really jumping into wine because there is, craft cocktails. There's the seltzer movement. There's all kinds of other things that are getting their attention. So while, yes, there is a younger clientele, how are we going to grab them? What is our thing? What's the hook?
Well, the first thing I want to start is bringing out the disadvantages that wine has. Let's compare it to some other beverages. So the obvious is other alcohols, beer, cocktails, spirits, right? When you talk about beer, you can go to a bar, get 16 ounces. That's a lot of liquid.
Yes.
And pay anywhere from $5 to $10 for that 16 ounces of beer.
Right.
And then if your budget fits, you can get another and get another and get another. Not that you can't do that with wine, but if you're wanting a good wine versus a microbrewery, you're talking about starting at $20 a glass for 5 ounces of liquid.
Correct.
And working your way on up. Now, you talk about liquor. Let's talk about it in terms of bringing it home. So if I buy a 6-pack of beer, if it's at a craft brewery, maybe I'm paying $15 to $20 for that 6-pack. Maybe a little bit more if they're really bougie.
Mm-hmm.
If I buy a high-end liquor, maybe I'm paying $100 for it. But when I open it, I don't have to drink it in 5 days.
That's a very good point.
You buy a bottle of wine, and you have to commit to drinking the whole thing within 5 days at the max, realistically 2 days. And if you want it at its best, you're really committing to drinking one bottle of wine in one sitting. And that's a bit rough. Now they've tried to come up with what we call mini splits or 375s.
Smaller formats, yeah.
Yeah, and those are great, but how often have you actually bought one and it doesn't taste like the 750 version?
I'll have you know, in December, I took Sheena down to Monterey. We ate at a restaurant, and, we're in wine, we're winemakers, but, we don't really drink a whole bottle of wine at dinner. So I actually ordered a 375 of Pinot, and it just happened to have been corked. But yeah, no, that's the thing, right? So I have noticed that restaurants are offering the smaller format more because I think it is to your point, in one sitting, you don't really drink as much wine as maybe say, beer or liquor even, depending.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have some other problems too. I mean, they've tried to do things in can. That's created some of its own issues.
Sure.
And at that point, you're just drinking cheap wine. So have fun in the morning.
Right.
There's boxed wine, and I know a lot of people that enjoy boxed wine. They mainly cook with it, but, boxed wine, once again, cheap product, nothing special. And you have so many other venues now that I at least see in Sacramento, I can't speak for every city, that you can go out and enjoy a beverage, have a good time fellowshipping with friends, and not pay $20 per glass or $50 to $100 for a bottle. Sacramento specifically has been known for coffee. They have a lot of coffee roasters. At one point, they were considered, I don't remember if it was number one or one of the top in the country, but they were a top coffee region in the area.
I did not know that.
Yeah. They started having something like more roasters per capita than anywhere else, or
Wow.
a lot of them won a lot of awards.
Huh.
And so you can go get a cup of coffee, hang out with a friend, tip $1, and you're out the door for $6. So I just bring all those up because wine, I don't know if they can solve some of those problems. There's things you can do. You can put it on tap, and you can charge for a glass per tap, and that'll save you from having someone to get a bottle when it comes to taking it home. Now you're talking about, well, what format am I going to bring it into?
Yeah. Here's a question that I'm scared to ask because it's so close to both of us, but do you feel like we're at a point in wine where there's just an oversaturation in the market of like so many producers and just kind of like way too many brands for the general consumer to keep track of or even know what's good, what's not? Do you think there's some of that, or is it something else?
I think that's a portion of it. I think there's truth to that, but I also would semi-disagree with it to one sense. Now, I'll try to best I can unpack that. In grocery stores, yes, there's major oversaturation.
Yes.
If you go to Napa Valley, there's wineries everywhere. It's very hard to get noticed in Napa.
Tell me about it.
However, there's smaller regions that have been making some noise. We've mentioned some of them today. Some of them are gaining traction. Some of them are not quite yet. Look at Paso Robles, look how it has turned into a real force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, you mentioned one before that we kind of touched on but didn't really like dive into, but Sassoon is Napa's next door neighbor and kind of a little bit kind of hot right now, to quote Zoolander.
Yeah.
He's so hot right now.
He's so hot right now.
Yes.
That Hansel is so hot right
Exactly.
now.
Thank you for saving me there.
Sassoon is definitely an up-and-coming region. It's got some great fruit. I've actually worked with it. So I make a Pinot Noir.
There you go.
I made a GSM, and I've made a Petit Syrah, and a Rosé out of the Pinot Noir from Sassoon Valley. And they've all turned out really, really well. And what Sassoon Valley has in its favor is right now, every winery located, including the big one, is family owned.
Correct.
And on top of that, their price of entry out there is drastically cheaper than Napa or Sonoma.
And it's fascinating because Sassoon literally shares the boundary with Napa.
It does. And, it's kind of funny that it's always been a region that winemakers knew about. When I was in the Sacramento Home Winemakers Club, they would talk about Sassoon all the time. Now, when I first started, I didn't know where Sassoon was. Now I do. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
You get that maritime, you share a hillside with Napa. It's known for Petit Syrah, which does great nutrient-rich soils. There's a lot of pros to that region. The con is it's not very big.
Yeah, frankly, I'm surprised it took this long for Sassoon to really get put on the map. It just should have, literally with how close it is to the big region.
Exactly.
It should have been, we should have been talking about it more sooner.
Yeah. And so these little small regions, I think, hold a pretty good chance of sitting through a wine recession, as you should say. But going back to the issues with what's going on in the state of the wine industry, the part of me that's not worried is the part of me that knows this industry has been around long ago. It's one of the first beverages made. People drank it because their water wasn't sanitary.
Correct.
France has had its heyday. Italy has had its heyday. Greece has had its heyday. In the United States, I think, is still in its adolescence.
Agreed.
Its heyday.
Agreed.
And on top of that, I just remember growing up when wine was big, and then it wasn't, and then it was big again.
So we're in that downswing. We're in that downturn right now.
I think so.
Yeah. What do you think is our beacon of hope, our guiding light? Like, what should we hold on to as really young, up and coming players in this industry? What's the survival? What does survival look like for you?
Well, So survival for me looks a little different than for most. The whole idea of the way that I started this was to be very low in overhead, and so far I've been able to accomplish that. I'm hoping that I can continue to accomplish it. And for me, my plan is to not, as best as I can, that is, not grow at a super fast rate. And for those who don't understand what I mean, so this current vintage, I'm going to have made in 2024 a grand total of maybe 450 cases. It's very small. You're talking about the majority of your boutique wineries in Napa Valley being around 1,500 to 5,000 cases?
Yeah, about.
So I'm well below that. And with this upcoming harvest, I haven't quite got a game plan, but I'm hoping to bump that up to maybe 600.
Okay.
It's really going to depend on what I sell. If I can sell everything out, I will bump it up. If I can't sell everything out, I will keep it the same until I'm able to do that. So I think for me, is my strategy is hope that works. The beacon of light is this. I was talking to a guy. He came into a tasting room that I was working at, and this was not too long ago. This is about a year ago. And he happened to work in the bulk wine industry. And so we got chatting a little bit about all the things in bulk wine. And I asked him his thoughts on it, and he gave me a very interesting take. And this take was, to sum it up in not a very long term, he started talking about pre-COVID wine industry. Pre-COVID wine industry was starting to see numbers on a downturn. And they were very worried then, back 2018, 2019, going into 2020, that the wine industry was going to see a massive drop. And COVID happens, which you'd think would be the dagger.
Right, you would think.
But it wasn't, because people got stir crazy and the wine industry got creative and they did these online tastings and people supported their favorite wineries. And so they saw a massive increase. He basically said that what we're about to see is what should have came if COVID never happened.
Aha. Fascinating.
And so he thinks, and this was his opinion, and he's been in the industry selling bulk wine for over 20 years. He thinks that we're going to hit that downturn. He does not know how long it's going to go, but he said the beauty of it is that during that time, those young drinkers will grow older, they will make more money, they will be more intrigued with wine, and hopefully that will be in enough time to bring the wine industry back to its next surge. And
So-
that's my beacon of hope with wine.
I love that, and I kind of touched on that in my pilot episode with Sheena as well, where this generation right now is not so interested, but they will come home eventually because, they're going to get to that point in life where they want to have that dinner party and, impress their friends, and seltzer water is not going to do it. It's going to be that nice, really, artisan bottle of wine that you and I will probably, hopefully, have a chance at the table with at that point.
And two, I think a big key to bringing the wine industry back to its prowess has to do a lot with changing the way that this beverage is perceived.
I love where you're going with this.
You and I have both worked in tasting rooms in the Napa Valley. And, I hate to admit it, but there is a joy in being pretentious sometimes.
Sure.
I've worked at a tasting room before. That tasting room no longer exists, but the place that I did work, we were a high-end boutique winery, and we had a very wine-educated crowd, and my job was to be bougie about it. I had to say all the geeky stuff. The problem is, what percentage of people wanting to drink wine are on that level? Not very many.
Yeah.
And
Especially not now.
yeah. And how many times have you, with your wine, or done a tasting, and you start talking with your guests, and they start saying things like, well, I don't really know a lot about wine, or, I'm no wine expert. I think a lot of that has to do with the intimidating nature that, no offense to Napa Valley, I love Napa Valley, but Napa has portrayed, and it doesn't help that Hollywood
Yes.
has portrayed that wine is something that makes you better than everybody else.
I completely agree with this. And it got to a point working in some Napa tasting rooms, some Napa wineries where it's almost like the business model is to make people feel not cool enough, or oh, this is above you. Why are you even here? And it's this whole kind of really negative stigma that we're placing on this beautiful craft and industry. And it's done wine a lot of disservice and hurt, which is exactly what we need to crawl ourselves out of, and why I started the Wine Maverick, to kind of make wine approachable, fun, and casual. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just drinking fermented grape juice. Take it from two winemakers. It's really not that freaking hard. It's not.
Don't tell everybody that. We want to keep competition slim.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, whatever. They can make the wine, but they have to sell it. That's the hard part.
That's the
go
truth.
ahead and make the wine.
Yeah.
And then find homes for it. Good luck.
Yeah. And that's there's a reality to that. It's that at the end of the day, this is a beverage. It's a beverage that we've placed on a pedestal and we've made a big deal. I mean, how many tastings have you gone to where you sit there and the person starts telling you statistics that don't mean anything?
Right. Correct. And then not only that, but the whole rock starification of certain winemakers, but not others, is another thing where it's like, oh yeah, our winemaker is blah, 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 and he is God's gift to man. And it's like, okay, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, we get it.
And then you find out that he's never stepped a day in that wine cellar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's like a consulting winemaker, never even stepped a foot in that winery, and just kind of gave guidelines as to what he thinks you should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've known many places like that, and God bless him for creating that name.
Sure.
I mean, I would love to be the guy that you slap on your label, pay me $150,000 for a year, and I never step foot in your property.
I don't think I could ever actually do that, though. I care too much.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
I mean, I don't know. And I think we went down a path that sounds like we're digging or dissing, but I don't know. It's just kind of, wine has reached that point where it's become this cult, thing that it really should never have been. It's just a really great way to express yourself. And in my opinion, it's been breeding a certain us versus them mentality that should never have been there.
I'd agree. I mean, I've been guilty of it at times myself,
We all were part of that race.
Yeah,
that rat race.
And for me, what constitutes a good wine is a little bit different than some others. I make wine, and so I believe when possible, you should make it bone dry. It shouldn't be too high in sugars. It should have a good acid on the back. And, I don't necessarily like sweet wines too much. But if you asked me, hey, would you accidentally make something called White Zinfandel and be mad about it? Not a chance.
Knowing the amount of money that came after that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I get that.
If I made a White Zinfandel, which for those who aren't familiar with that, it's a sweet rosé of Zin, really.
Yeah, it was pretty much a mistake. It was a stuck fermentation that turned out to be really profitable for a certain company, and then everybody else followed suit, and it created a whole trend in the market.
Yeah, so if I make millions off of a mistake, that's not my favorite wine, and that's what I become known for. I can still make what I want to make. I have the money to fund it. I'm just not necessarily known for that, but who cares? The person that comes in, they've never had wine before, they taste something that tastes like candy going down the back of their tongue. That's their gateway drug. That gets them into wine.
We talk about the gateway drug a lot, and it's usually like the rosé, the Pinot Noirs, the softer stuff, because, of course, the American palate does have that, what I call the Cinnamon Toast Crunch palate. You grew up on really sweet cereals, you drank soda, you're eating all these fast foods that have all these empty carbs. Like you want that instant gratification, and sweet wines will give that to you. But then eventually you start maturing and you get into the bigger, bolder stuff. And then eventually you just say, I like Napa Cab and nothing else. And then we hate you.
Yeah.
That's basically how it goes.
That's the cycle. So, I mean, I know that we've kind of danced around the original question, but I think all that really comes into play. What do we think about the state of the wine industry? Well, it's in trouble.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be permanently in trouble. And I think that we also need to look in the mirror and kind of realize that some of the rhetoric that we use in these tasting rooms and the pretentiousness and the elitism portion of it needs to at least be dialed back a bit, because otherwise we're not going to have entry-level buyers want to come in and buy our stuff.
I completely pick up what you're putting down. It's really funny because sometimes I do come across in the tasting room because, both of us, our full-time gig is not only working on our wines, it's working for another company, right? And working in their tasting rooms. And it's funny because the novice taster annoys me up front because it's like, oh man, why don't you why are you annoying me with this stuff?
Oh,
but then
yeah.
at the same time, it's like, wait a minute. These people actually are here. They want to learn. They're they're soaking it up like a sponge. what's wrong with me? Like, I've been trained to be that snobby wine guy, and it's like, this is a carte blanche. This is like a new, fresh new mind to really impress and kind of just make wine fun for them. And then when I think about that and I go through the tasting, I actually really enjoying it, because it's like, I can literally just have fun here. It's not like rocket science like we talked about before. And that is something huge that the wine industry needs to kind of break down its own borders to do that and be that kind of thing, that kind of community.
It does. I mean, and perfect example of what you just said. About a month ago, I had a young couple in their early 20s come in, do a tasting. They were noobs completely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, how'd you find out about us? Through TikTok, which,
yeah,
man, talk about words I never want to hear. But we get into it, and they were truly intrigued, and they were eager to learn. And at the end of it, they bought our cheapest wine, but they bought wine.
That counts.
Yeah. And they enjoyed their time, and they thanked me for it. And to my surprise, they tipped me $5, which I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but for a 23-year-old,
sure,
it might as well have been like $50.
In this day and age, any tip is a good tip. I mean, we can cover tipping culture in another episode probably, but it's not what it used to be. And I get it, times are tough and inflation and whatever buzzwords you want to throw out, but it is the service industry, and it's like a restaurant. Not many people go to a restaurant and stiff their waiter, and it's just been really weird with the tips, man. They're non-existent. It's so strange. I don't know how you feel about that, but
yeah, I've noticed a downturn in that too. I don't know what the full answer is, though I do know there might be tip fatigue.
There could be.
I mean, think about it. You go to a Chipotle, they want a tip. You go to a Starbucks,
a corner store, they're offering. Yeah, I get that.
Which Starbucks makes sense. They're making me a drink. They're giving me a different type of service. But
right.
if I go to a fast food joint and you're literally having me punch in my order on a machine, and then you throw it down and hand me something that you actually made about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, no, I have. It's hard to justify that, but definitely, you see, it's just, to me, it's service industry. It's it's hospitality. I guess I was born in it and came up in that world, so I know. But yeah, that culture, there is fatigue there for sure, and I don't want to come off as like an asshole about it, but it's weird. It's a weird world.
Yeah, no, very much is. I'll throw this out to any consumers out there listening to this for the enjoyment. You want to know how to really support a winery? Yeah, buy their wine from the grocery store. And I get it, when I say this statement, you might be thinking, well, if I go to you, directly to you, what if I find the store's cheaper? You know what? Buy that one that's cheaper. We have something that you've never seen before. Buy that from us. Yeah.
That's a good point. I don't really know how to end this episode because it sounds like we're coming in super hot. And I did ask all the hard ass questions. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, I'd say let's end it like this. Let's ask ourselves a fun little question that takes us away. Because we don't want to sound like we're complaining. Because
We're not.
The reality is
sometimes I do, but no.
Yeah. We want to speak reality to this. But I'll ask you this question. You can ask it to me. But what's your favorite part about winemaking?
For me, it's kind of close to yours, but it's the creation aspect of it. I've always been kind of artistic. I grew up, loving like cinema. So I went to film school. That was my first love. And just, creating something, building a scene. And that to me kind of brought me out here. And the idea of just walking down a vineyard, tangibly grabbing a bunch of grapes, biting into them, seeing where they could go, picking the fruit on a again, driving out to the vineyards on early mornings, vineyards that are dancing in the fog, and like this crisp kind of new feeling is what just brings me back every single harvest. And then bringing this stuff in and having literally a few hours to make something with it, or else it'll spoil. It's this fun challenge. It's this big Rubik's Cube that you have to figure out, working with Mother Nature's bounty. That is what brings me back every time. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I love about it.
Yeah, you're just kind of you're challenging yourself and the world,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sweet.
So, where can people find you? Where can they find your wines? Are you on Instagram?
I am on Instagram. I have Harlow Wine Company Instagram, and then I'm working on creating a Facebook that's just dedicated to Harlow Wine Company. Right now, you can find me, RJ Harlow, on either Facebook or Instagram. And then you can buy my wines at www.harlowwinecompany.com. And yeah, if you're thinking in your head, that sounds like two W's in a row. It is HARLOWWINE company.com. Lot to say, but it's catchy.
Cool. Yeah. And it's been really great watching you transition from your home winemaking to your commercial. It's just, I'm rooting for you. We're tasting.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you. We're tasting your red blend here, and it's really developed nicely. I'm picking up a lot of graphite on it now. The tannins have kind of, softened up a little bit, and it's just enjoyable. It went great with that pizza.
Oh, yeah. I actually wasn't sure if it would go well with it, but I was really pleased.
Oh,
so
hell
thank
yeah.
you so much.
No, dude, yeah, thank you for bringing that. You can follow me on Instagram at The Wine Maverick. I do a lot of wine tasting kind of photos. I'm going to do some wine-centric videos as well as part of just, again, making wine casual and approachable. And you can reach out to the show, thewinemaverickshow@gmail.com if you have questions or want to bring up any topics or segments as well. I have been Pablo Suarez. This is The Wine Maverick, and RJ Harlow was my guest today. Say how you want to close this out, RJ.
I just want to say, thank you for getting me on your show, man. It's been a long time coming, and I'm excited for what things you've got going on. And you should definitely check out Identity Wine as well. It's Pablo's brand. So thanks again, and love to chat with you in the future.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for plugging my wine too.
No problem.
Good night, guys. Bye.